Good morning everyone, my name is Rooster and this is Gwent the Witcher card game. We are taking a look at the new player experience today, and for that purpose I made a new account. I'm not going into detail on how to obtain a new account. Let me just tell you that it ain't hard. If you really want to be in this beta, you can be in this beta. And that is all I'm going to say about it. That said, the new player experience right now is not exactly where it should be, and CD Projekt Red is very well aware of that, but the game is suffering from a little bit of barrier to entry. It is a reasonable barrier, but after that the experience is actually really smooth. The game is very generous with its rewards, so once you've crossed that barrier, it is pretty much smooth sailing, but a new player might be stupefied at how to actually progress in the game, and that I think has three main reasons. So first of all, a new player might be inclined to hop into practice, and can we practice against an AI opponent here? That would be nice. What is going on here? Ah, there we go. So we can take one of the starter decks to play against an AI opponent, and then we get absolutely stomped by high quality cards that we have no way to compare against, and especially new players. You can definitely win with the starter deck against one of the AI, but the experience will first of all not be fun, because you're playing against cards that are much stronger than yours. So you feel outclassed, and above all, you're not getting any rewards, because battles against AI do not give experience or progress towards your daily quest. So first of all, as a new player, ignore the AI. I should mention, things are very much still in flux, and this advice may very well change in the future. But for now, AI opponents are not for new players. I'm not really sure what the target audience for the AI opponents is, because pretty much everything is better tested against real opponents. So if you're a new player, just hop into casual matches, because the AI opponents will mop the floor with you. Second of all, matchmaking with real players does bring us to the second problem, because currently the matchmaking system tends to match up casual players with experienced players that have just lost a bunch of games. They may have really expensive decks, but they're experimenting, they're trying new stuff, they have some connection issues, like myself. Basically, there's a lot of reasons for your casual matchmaking rating to go into the absolute dumpster, and thus a new player, I've encountered them myself, might be matched up against someone who is 19 levels higher and has a bunch of expensive cards that they, again, similar to the AI opponents, have no way to compete with, which can again lead to a frustrating experience. Now, I should probably mention that there is still a way to progress here, because the daily system does only take into account rounds won and not matches won. So you can go all out against the player, trying to win one round, and then losing the game, because you went all out and expended all your resources in one round, and thus your opponent wins 2 rounds and takes the game easily. But you made some progress towards your daily rewards. And daily rewards being relatively generous, especially the first daily reward, which you'll get for only winning 3 games or winning 6 rounds. Those rewards are pretty generous, will not really take that much time, even if you're just losing 6 games, but winning a round in each. So that's relatively okay. It's not the experience you're looking for as a new player, just losing 6 games every day. But at least you're increasing your collection, and you'll soon find yourself capable of competing. So there's a solution. Always go into casual. If you're finding yourself outmatched, try to win at least 1 round. And if you happen to find yourself losing a lot, at least that does lower your casual matchmaking rating, which makes it more likely to be matched up with either really bad opponents, really experimental opponents, opponents with bad connections, or other newbies. So it will improve over time, but it can prove to be a frustrating experience for now. This may very well improve in the nearby future, but for now, that would be my advice. Now, the third problem is the starter decks. So let's hop into our deck builder. Actually, let me quickly show the collection a new player has available to them, because people might actually be curious about that. There's not really a basic set, and I should mention as well, this is subject to change. CDPR have said that that new starter decks will start when the game hits open meta. So this is very much in flux still, but this should give a decent indication of what a new player has available to them. I hope the game didn't crash here. Maybe it's just my mouse or something? I really don't know what's going on here. At least the keyboard still works, so that's fine. So if we can switch to owned cards here, that would make it a lot easier. As you can see, we're starting the game with... Can we please not... What is wrong with my mouse right now? Anyway. So we have Gerald. That will only be the case, I think, in the closed beta so far. We have a prize-winning cow, the Commander's Horn, and Scorch, and those are our only neutral silver and golds. We don't have any faction-specific golds, but we do have one silver card for every single... That was not the button I needed to press. For every single faction. So that does help a little bit. Can we... yes, we can filter on silver cards. Let's see. We can filter on factions, silver cards, owned cards only. So we have a couple of faction-specific cards. Close filters. There we go. One for each faction, all pretty decent cards, all pretty much 10 strength in value. So those should help a little bit, but overall, the starters collection is rather poor. Now that is not the main problem here. The problem is the basic decks are even worse. So if we can take a look at the starter decks for each faction, you can see I've already made some basic faction decks over here, who are marginally different from the starter decks, of course, because your collection is still small. There's not a lot you can change here, but there is something to be done about the starter deck. So let's go across all of the different factions and see what can be improved about their starter deck. So starting with the monster deck, we've got a bit of a mishmash between what monsters want to do. We have a few frost immune units. So that you might be inclined to add some weather, and the game does that for you. However, you also have a lot of non-frost immune units in the melee row, which makes that a little awkward. So we're removing the frost. We're keeping the fog for now, so that does mean that we're removing the Ram Warrior here. So sorry, Ram Warrior. They might be reworked later to be of better use, but for now we can't use any vulnerable units in range row. The Arakas are a little bit strange. You might be inclined to add, let's say, a few bronze units. We've got the Arakas Behemoth over here. That has some synergy with the Arakas, but overall the archetype is not very well supported, so I would suggest we just cut these. So we cut the Arakas. That also means we're cutting the Monster's Nest, because that doesn't really serve a purpose right now. And that leaves us with a 20-card deck. A little bit of odd choices over here in the spells category. Especially the Thunderbolt Potion, which is going to be a little unimpressive unless you get both golems out on the field. to die in the same turn, then you'll never get more than 8 value out of this card. So it's a bit tricky to use, we're removing it. Swallow Potion can stay, it has decent synergy with the monster passive ability to keep a unit around for the next round, so we're keeping the rest. And now we're adding 6 cards to replace the ones we've just removed. Ghoul is a decent card, especially if you have some decent units in your deck. Can also occasionally just screw your opponent over if they're trying to reanimate something from their own graveyard, so we're adding Ghoul. We're adding a second Wild Hunt Warrior. It won't really find a lot of great targets, but it is still a decent unit. It's frost immune. It is there. It is probably better than the other choices. Lacerate is an excellent spell, which we'll be adding to a lot of different decks. Elzar's Thunder, premium removal spell, so definitely worth adding here. Ancient Foglet, excellent card, especially with double fog in your deck. And now we're missing one single card, and that is going to be First Light, which should be a 2-off in every single starter deck. So now we've improved the quality of the deck as well as the consistency, because we'll not be frosting our own fiends anymore. We won't have any monster nests that will only really spawn some Arakaze, and that's basically it. You should be able to get some wins with the deck. One thing I should mention, don't expect any miracles from a deck like this, but try to make your cards do more work than they would be worth. So basically, we've got, for example, Scorch and Lacerate. You can make these cards be worth more than the average worth of a card by using them efficiently. So if you use Scourge on either a huge unit of your opponents or on multiple units of your opponents, then you can make up for the lack of quality in your deck compared to your opponents. And the same applies to, for example, Swallow Potion. If you manage to use it on a single unit that you can preserve for the next round, that is excellent. Lacerate on a row with a lot of units in it, excellent value. Elzar's Thunder on an especially key unit of your opponents that's going to run out of hand, run away with the game, if left unchecked. Cards such as these can help you win games that you would have no business winning because of the card quality in your deck. So much for the monster deck. Let's hop into the Northern Realms deck. What we're going to do here is again take a look at what the deck wants to do. Now the main synergy in the deck here is going to be the leader Foltest. Foltest makes a copy of a bronze unit, and Foltest especially has synergy with buffs. So we're going to focus on buffs. The deck also has a tiny little theme of making units gold. It's not very well supported. The only real synergy card we have here is the Reinforced Siege Tower. We could add another Reinforced Siege Tower over here, because we do have 2. But in general, it's not really worth it to include a lot of gold synergy, while you don't even have 4 gold units to play with. So let's remove the Siege Tower. The Dumb Banner can stay, mostly because it's a little bit of a resilient unit, or your opponent can't interact with it. And in general, I find it to be more useful than the Dumb Banner Light Cavalry, and because it's basically the same as long as it stays on the board for 2 turns. So let's remove the Light Cavalry, who are in general a little underwhelming. And then let's see what we're doing to make up for these. Oh, also, we should probably remove the Epidemic here. Because you're using quite a number of 3 and 2 strength units, you'll often find yourself hitting your own units with the Epidemic. So we don't want that. Removing that, and also removing double promotes, because we can do better than just promoting 2 units at most. For example, we can add a Thunderbolt Potion. And we are interested in Thunderbolt Potion here, mostly because we can relatively easily get 3 of the same units out using Foltest's ability. And we can even go as far as, well, as far as 4, I guess, if you're copying Boar Infantry with Foltest. But that's a decent value, So Thunderbolt can stay. It's not all that hard to make this a 12 power card, and that's excellent. Swallow Potion can stay because Foltest can copy the unit you Swallow Potion, and it makes this card worth 16. Of course, be afraid of your opponent using Scorch, so be a little careful with that. And in general, the other cards are fine. Adrenaline Rush we're adding, because copying a unit with Adrenaline Rush with Foltest is an excellent use of a card. Let's see, let me quickly check my notes here. We need a few more units to make proper use of all the buffs we're adding. So we're adding the Heavy Cavalry. We're adding the Cow because it's in general a decent unit, and it's something to do when you're in a round that your opponent has already decided they're going to lose, but they're just going to keep playing cards. You don't want to overcommit on the board, and Cow does help you do that. It's a really bad top deck in the third round, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. We're adding Lacerate because Lacerate is all around amazing. And did we need to add something else? Yes, we did. And the final card is going to be Ulcer's Thunder. We're only adding a single copy here. Mostly because it's probably the least important card in our deck right now. And one copy should suffice to take out key targets in your opponent's deck. Right, so far Northern Realms. Let's go take a look at the Skellige starter deck. What we have here is, again, a little bit of a mishmash of different themes. We've got some weather immune units. So they thought it would be a good idea to include some weather, but then we also have the Shieldsmiths and in later rounds the Priestesses that do gain a significant amount of strength. So I think it's a bad idea to be including weather here, so we won't do that. The self-wounding theme that we have with the Holger Blackhand, perhaps, and the Berserkers is also rather weak. We don't really want to put effort into hurting our own units. So these cards are rather underwhelming, so we're removing the 3 Berserkers. And hence we're also removing 1 Warcry. Now the reason we're keeping the other Warcry is because we're adding in another Uncrate Warrior. Because these are actually sort of decent cards on their own, and combined with a single Warcry in the deck, as well as the opportunity to hurt your own units with Holger Blackhand, for example, you generally don't want to hurt your own units with the hunters, but the option's there, I guess. So this makes a valid option, and Warcry with just 1 Uncrate Warrior plus Krach's ability does have a value of 14, so it's decent. You don't want 2 Warcries because they're a little clunky with not enough synergy to really make it work. Now we probably want to focus on the Resurrection theme, so if you find another Priestess, then definitely include that, but for now we'll work with 2 of those. Resurrection works excellently with increases in base strength, and Shieldsmith is a perfectly serviceable card in that regard, so we're adding another Shieldsmith. And what else? Let me quickly check. Skald is an amazing unit, definitely playable, so let's add another Skald. You'll probably use it in the melee row most of the time, but the siege row is definitely an option. And as long as you have at least 2 units, preferably more, then Skald is excellent value out of your units. In general, Skellige is rather well off just because of their faction ability, so you can throw away the first game, for example, and then all your units will gradually become stronger as the rounds progress, and if you, for example, play a Skirmisher in round 1, and then resurrect it in round 2, and then resurrect it again in round 3, that Skirmisher will be quite strong. So it not only does it gain +1 for each round because of the faction ability, but it also gains an extra 4 strength for each time it's resurrected, so that will end up with an additional 10 strength, being a 15 strength bronze card. Seems pretty good. Seems pretty good, and there's definitely a way to run away with games, especially as a beginner player. So what are we filling the deck out with? We have 2 First Light, so that's excellent. We are not really interested in the Thunderbolt potions, although I guess we could include a Thunderbolt potion because we can get as many as 3 Uncrate Warriors on the field. However, that does have some anti-synergy with the Warcry, so in general I would not really recommend it until you add some additional copies of units to the deck. So we're running the deck out with double Elser's Thunder, never bad. Removing strength from your opponent's units is always slightly stronger than adding strength to your own board, mostly because you can pinpoint important units. So this deck did improve significantly. Definitely recommend it as a starter deck. Skellige is quite strong actually for a starting player. Although it may not look that way, the ability to get a lot stronger in the late game is very, very significant. Even just a Clan Brockfur Hunter becomes a 9 strength swing in the late game, and Holger is a 12. It's quite good. Okay, so for the last one, we're headed to the basic Skellige starter deck. Sorry, Scoia'Tael, and I'm butchering Skellige, but anyway, pronunciations and whatnot. So this deck is a bit of a huge letdown for beginners, and that mostly has to do with the Elven Mercenary here. Which hurts you more than it helps. But the solution here, interestingly enough, is not to remove the Elven Mercenary, because that's actually a really strong card, and we want to make use of that, especially since we have a second copy, and we really want to add that. But we need to add some consistency to the Elven Mercenary. Now, I would like to remove the Scorch, because the Mercenary is somewhat likely to Scorch at an inopportune time and just kill one of your own units. That's a bit of a sad situation. But Scorch is also a really powerful card for beginning players, and is one of the ways that you're actually going to swing games. So we would like to retain the Scorch, but still play the Mercenary. So we'll just have to be a little careful about when to play your Mercenary. Especially when you have the strongest minion on the board, you don't want to play the Mercenary, but you do want to be able to play the Mercenary in most occasions, which means that we're removing the Weather, because Weather is a really big feel-bad for this deck. You don't want to Mercenary into Weather. You could consider adding one single Weather and just never playing into that row. That's possible, so you could add a Fog or a Frost to the deck and then just never play into the row that you're likely to weather. And Scoia'Tael do have that option. I guess you could add a Fog. The problem with that is we have some strong melee units, so we can't really play Frost because we'll randomly just nuke our own board. We want to add a second Dwarven Skirmisher because that's a really strong card, so we can't really run Rain either. And we kind of don't want to run Fog because a lot of the opponents that you'll be facing are monsters, and then you'll just give your opponent some free Foglets. So therefore, no Weather. We're removing that. And in return, we're adding some spells that you actually want to run, such as Lacerate. Worst comes to worst, your opponent has no minions and you swipe an empty row. Not ideal, but in general you should be playing your mercenaries when your opponent has something on the board and when you yourself have something on the board. So therefore, Swallow Potion excellent, Adrenaline Rush excellent, mostly because of the synergy with the Hawker support over here. If you can get Hawker support to stick to the board, have it a little buffed and then land an Adrenaline Rush on it, then you'll be in a pretty good position unless your opponent is able to deal with that. And any game where your opponent is unable to deal with your Hawker support, you're certainly in a pretty good position. So, to enhance that a little further, we don't want Thunderbolt Potion because we'll never have the We'll never have more than 2 copies of a unit on the board. So that is not too impressive. We definitely want to add a First Light because of the rally option, which is really, really important in Scoia'Tael. Again, make sure that when you're casting a rally, consider your options. You could run into an archer, so you want to use the rally ability when your opponent has some minions on the field that you can target with it. You don't want to be forced to target your own unit. I guess the archer can target your own units, but a possible mercenary into Ulcer's Thunder, which we're definitely going to add. is possible. So why are we adding all these cards? Well, mostly because we hardly have any synergy with the Mahakam Defender, so it might be tempting to include it in the deck, but I wouldn't. It works nicely in a dwarf-focused deck, but we don't really have the cards to synergize with that, so we're removing the Defender, and the Rehab Officer is just hopefully underwhelming and probably not worth including, so let's remove that one. Now we have a 25-card deck that should actually be able to win a decent amount of games. Mostly running off of the Hawker support, so definitely look for that one, but also by just building a nice board, running Mercenaries into First Flight into another minion, and then Hawker Healer, which is a really strong card, to bring big buffs to your entire board. So this should be able to take some games off of unexpected opponents, and is a decent starting point for deck expansion further on. Alright, so that is as much as I wanted to say about the starter decks. With these improvements, you should be able to at least have a decent fighting chance against other newer players, perhaps even steal some wins from decks that are much better than yours. So to finish off, let me just throw a few random beginner tips that I would like to add somewhere, but don't really fit anywhere. First of all, start opening your free kegs. You always start with a free keg, and you get one for signing up for the newsletter. So do that and get your free keg, and then go to single player and finish the tutorial. You may be tempted to just skip it because you already know the game well enough. But if we're looking at the tutorials here, and on the right side of the tutorial screen, we can find tutorials on card management, which all give rewards as well. So we can finish this one for 50 scraps, this one for another keg, and this one for 100 ore. So make sure you don't forget about those. And further on, just let your kegs guide you a little bit in what deck you're willing to play. If you open up a decent gold card for one of the factions, give that faction a try. Try to start the deck, try adding the card in it, and see how it works. And overall, once you've played the game for a couple of days, once you've amassed a couple of kegs, it should gradually get better as your deck improves. So general improvements you'll be looking for when you're looking at the starter decks. Why does my mouse not work? I really don't get it. General improvements you're looking for are mostly third copies of key minions in the deck. So for example, the Priestess of Freya really works better in 3s. Extra poor inventories, extra field medics for the other realms. You're looking at extra, let's say, extra foglets for the monster deck. Basically looking at third copies of commons, third copies of rares, decently statted epics also really pull their weight. Just go give it a try. Try them out in your decks, see how they work. If not, cut them. If yes, keep trying. Alright, so that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Hope this has been of some help to you. And I will see you next time.